Hi, everybody, and welcome to Dr. D's 5-minute lecture series. Today, I'm going to be talking about the design argument in order to prove God's existence. So, let's go. Setting the timer now. Now, in order to understand the design argument, we have to be able to distinguish between three important terms in logic, and that is the difference between deductive reasoning, inductive reasoning, and abductive reasoning. Now, deductive reasoning is reasoning that's based prior to experience and follows a kind of formal logic in a way that if the premises are true, then the conclusion must be true. So, for example, all men are mortal, Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal. Now, inductive reasoning, on the other hand, is very different from deductive reasoning. Inductive arguments are neither deductively valid nor deductively invalid. This is because they are not deductive arguments at all. They are inductive arguments, and induction is simply not the same as deduction. It is not that one sort of argument is better or worse than the other, it is just that there are two quite different ways of putting together premises and conclusions. So, another way we can understand inductive arguments is that they are based on evidence of observed cases and unobserved cases. And therefore, the results are never going to be guaranteed, but will only be more or less probable. So, for example, if you wanted to argue that all bachelors have hairy legs, you could take a sample of several hundred bachelors and then come up with a probability of how likely it is for bachelors to have hairy legs. Whereas if you wanted to make the statement that all bachelors are unmarried men, then you could say with certainty that they are, because it is in the definition of a bachelor to be an unmarried man. Now, when we get to the design argument, what we see is that we have a different kind of argument known as an abductive argument. Now, abduction is an inference to the best explanation, or more accurately, inference to the best of the available explanations going around. So it's somewhat different from induction. And so keeping this in mind, let's very briefly look at the basic form of the design argument. Number one, as far as we are able to determine, all highly complex objects, such as watches, buildings, and cars, are all the products of intelligent design. 2. The universe is a highly complex object. Therefore, 3. The universe is probably the product of intelligent design. So this is a basic format of the design argument. It looks at the complexity of the world, and then from that complexity, it attempts to argue that there must be some designer behind the complexity that we see in the universe. Now, the most famous, probably the most famous argument of the traditional design form was put forward by William Paley. Paley was born in July of 1743 in Peterborough, England, and he was trained in the Anglican priesthood. He graduated from Christ's College in Cambridge, and he was appointed a fellow and tutor of his college in 1766. He also rose through the ranks of the Anglican Church, and he died in May of 1805. Now, the argument that Paley put forward, very briefly, is he says if you were walking along, say, on a path sometime, and you came upon a watch, and you picked it up, say, as opposed to a rock, and looking at the complexity of the watch and the design of the watch, it would make sense, sort of abductively, to infer, given the complexity of the watch and its functionality, that there was some intelligence behind it to make this watch. And this is what's known as Paley's watch analogy. Now, this comes under heavy critique from, say, David Hume, for example, and possibly a topic for a later 5-minute lecture. So this is Dr. D signing off on another 5-minute lecture. Thanks for joining me.